call to order the Planning Commission meeting for Thursday, May 16th, 2019. Please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Herlicker, please call the roll.
Yeah, Commissioner Knobloch.
Here.
Commissioner Heikkila.
Here.
Commissioner Bradley.
Here.
Commissioner Geisler.
Here.
Commissioner Casey.
Here.
Commissioner Schmalke.
Here.
And Chair Schwartz.
Here. Our first order of business this evening is to adopt our agenda.
Second.
Motion by Heikkila, second by Knobloch. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Agenda's been adopted. Next, we have our approval of our minutes of our April 18th meeting.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the minutes from April 18th.
Second.
Motion by Casey, second by Knobloch. Any discussion or corrections? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Minutes are adopted with one abstention from Commissioner Schmalke. All right, on to our old business. We have planning cases 19-4 and 19-5. Mr. Harlicker.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. What I'd like to do tonight is take each of those as separate items. The first item is the request for a preliminary plat approval. The property is located here, south of 610, west of 47, the intersection of Springbrook Drive and 94th. It's this area here. It's approximately 4.68 acres. What is being proposed is to plat that as one lot, and as part of that, they're also platting the right-of-way for Springbrook Drive. Here's the proposed preliminary plat of the Springbrook Drive. You've got the easements around the perimeter of the property. Public hearing for this was continued from the April meeting. Staff's recommendation is approval of the preliminary plat with 4 conditions listed in the staff report.
Okay. Commission, any questions from Mr. Harlicker? All right, we did open the public hearing on this last month and continued it here to this evening. At this time, I will reconvene the public hearing on the preliminary plat. That's just the land. It's got nothing to do with what's going on the land. Is there anyone here that wishes to address this portion of the agenda talking about the preliminary plat? Anyone wish to speak on this portion? Seeing none, close the public hearing. And commission.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Casey, or Schmalke, excuse me.
In planning case 19-4, I'll make a motion to recommend approval of the preliminary plat for Port Evergreen based on findings that the proposal plat complies with the lot dimensions of the Port District and meets city subdivision requirements with the following conditions. Compliance with Title 11 City Code of Coon Rapids. Park dedication for the lot be paid prior to releasing building permit and will be based on the number of units in the apartment. All comments of the city engineer must be addressed, and all comments from MnDOT must be addressed.
Second.
Motion by Schmalke, second by Knobloch. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? That motion carries. And this is a recommendation by the Planning Commission and will be heard by the City Council at their June 4th meeting. Next, we have planning case 19-5, the preliminary and final site plan for 168-unit apartments at Springbrook Drive and 94th Avenue, real estate equities. Mr. Harlicker.
Again, this is the proposed site plan for the apartment building. This has been originally on the March 24th meeting. At that meeting, action was postponed to the April 18th meeting. Issues included density, parking, open space, and how the apartment would fit in the neighborhood. At that time, the unit count was 184 units. At the April 18th meeting, the applicant had addressed the density and parking by reducing the number of units to 176, and they also increased the parking spaces. That was done primarily from shortening up this wing of the apartment building. Prior to the April 18th meeting, the applicants requested that the item be postponed to tonight's meeting, and that allowed them time to rework the unit counts. So the plan that the commission is considering tonight, they have reduced the number of units down to 168. This was done primarily by reworking the mix of units within the apartment building. The density has been reduced from 41.7 units down to 31.8. As stated earlier, that was done mostly by reworking the units and getting rid of this portion of the south wing. The density allowed in the Port Evergreen zoning district is 30 units per acre. The applicant is requesting use flexibility to allow the density at 38.1 units. Use flexibility can be approved provided certain findings are made. The first one is the modifications advances the intent of this section. The density at 31.8 promotes a compact and vigorous development that takes advantage of the nearby transit and commercial opportunities around Coon Rapids Boulevard. It has a well-organized pedestrian vehicular circulation pattern. Again, they've got sidewalks around the site, extending down to down to Springbrook, then extending down to Springbrook to the edge of their property line. They also have a trail and walking area overlooking Pleasure Creek. Building is constructed of high-quality materials and has unique design, and it is constructed with a goal of locating high-density residential in the Port District. The modification is necessary to develop the property in an efficient, well-organized way. It will shrink the gap between affordable housing and the high demand for affordable housing within the city. It allows the applicant to include upgraded finishes and amenities in the units, and it will also act as a catalyst for future development in the port. The plan also provides site amenities such as a walking path, preservation of existing trees, new landscaping, construction of a privacy fence. The parking is designed and the site is laid out so the majority of the parking is located within the center of the site. There is an activity area, flat area down on the along Pleasure Creek here. Also included is a dog run and a tot lot. They've got inside the apartment, they've got a club room, a fitness center, as well as underground parking. With respect to the parking, As stated earlier, the number of parking has been increased. They've increased it up from 270 originally to 285. Number of surface spaces is 117, and the number of underground stalls is 168. The 168 units is slightly reduced because the building has been shortened in this area here. Parking ratio has been increased from 1.46 spaces per unit to 1.7 spaces per unit. That was done by reducing the actual number of units and increasing the additional parking stalls. The applicant is requesting flexibility to allow the 1.7 spaces per unit, where the code requires 2.25 spaces per unit. The code requires a 2.75 and broken up to 230 surface spaces and 184 spaces for a total of 414 spaces for a project of this size. Flexibility may be approved provided modification is necessary to respond to site conditions, result in better integration of uses, or additional public amenities. The applicant is basing the proposed parking ratio on past experiences and documentation from the Institute of Traffic Engineers. Both those sources support reduced parking ratio. The ITE study shows a parking demand of 1.22 to 1.28. The proposed parking ratio allows for additional open space and for site amenities, dog park, and a green activity area. The other flexibility that the applicant is requesting tonight relates to setback from Flintwood. That's this area right here. Code requires a maximum 20-foot setback. The applicant is proposing about 90 feet from the right-of-way. Again, the modification is necessary to respond to site conditions and result in a better integration of uses. In order to reduce the number of units, again, this building wing was shortened, thereby increasing the setback from Springbrook Drive. There is a 50-foot drainage and utility easement from Pleasure Creek, which again forces the building farther back from Springbrook Drive. Open space on this site plan compared to the previous ones. This used to be a drainage pond. The applicant has proposing to do underground stormwater management, and this area here has now been replaced by a flat open space for recreation. They've also shifted the dog park and tot lot to the inside part of the site, and they increased the size of the dog park. This is the grading plan. As you can see, everything's kind of drained back this way to the creek, the flood area here. You've got some slope going back there. Along this sideline here, there will be a wall along here because of the change in grade. The applicant is also proposing a privacy fence to run from the back corner up to the front of the property here at 94th. Landscaping, they have increased the number of trees along Highway 47 to provide more of a buffer. They've added trees along here in the driveway going out to Springbrook and 94th. And they've added additional trees in here because it's been replaced with, excuse me, a flat area as opposed to a stormwater pond. Park dedication, the amount of $1,360 per unit will be required. The building design, is very similar to what council saw and residents saw back in March. Same type of materials. What has changed significantly, as you can tell from that site plan, is the reduction of this wing. This has been shifted back and angled a little bit, so it's more in line with this rear property line. That allows for additional parking in the front. So those are the two significant changes to the building elevations. With that, staff is recommending approval of the preliminary and final site plan with the conditions listed in the staff report. Condition number, privacy fence being installed on this 2 Springbrook Drive. Condition number 8, that fence has been shown on the plan extending down to the right-of-way here on 94th and Springbrook. So that condition could be deleted. And staff is also recommending findings for your use and design flexibility for density, parking, and parking setback or building setback from Flintwood Street. With that, I'll answer any questions. The applicant is also in the audience tonight and have a presentation I'd like to give to the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Harlicker. Commission, any questions of Mr. Harlicker before we have the petitioners? Mr. Heikla.
I could be
Commissioner
mistaken,
Heikla.
but I think I heard Mr. Harlicker say 31.8 twice.
38.1.
It should be 38.1.
Correct. Yep.
All right, the petitioners like to make their presentation at this time, please.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Patrick Ostrom with Real Estate Equities. This is Petro Megitz with Cost Wilson Architects, our architect for this project. Thank you all again for hearing our project here again tonight. We are very excited and we're confident that this is could be a great project in addition for the city and something that the city could really be proud of. Since the last meeting, we've spent a good amount of time working with the architects, taking into consideration comments from the commission and some of the neighbors and trying to make as many revisions as possible to address some of those concerns and still make the project feasible. So we want to go through some of those tonight, and Mr. Harlicker probably did cover some of them, but we'll run through it quick as well. A couple things I wanted to point out that we did touch on last meeting that we didn't spend too much time on, I don't think, but the need for affordable housing of this quality in the city of Coon Rapids and the metro area in general. There is an extremely high demand for this type of product as new market rate products keep getting built and raising rents in market rate projects. They're really driving rents all around up and putting stress on working class families to find a high quality affordable housing option, which this would provide. The city's comprehensive plan, the draft plan that's been submitted to Met Council, identifies the need for 457 new units of affordable housing within the city by 2030. We're proposing 168 units, so that would take a big step into the city achieving that important goal. Some of our market research we've done as well indicates a vacancy rate in apartments in the city of Coon Rapids of about 2.5%, which is extremely low, indicating a lot of pent-up demand and really a need for this type of product within the city. So I just wanted to kind of show a side-by-side comparison of what was proposed previously and where we're at, what you're reviewing today, and go through some of those changes again. Like Mr. Harlicker said, that one of the biggest changes was shortening up this leg pretty significantly to create more parking, more open space, allow for more landscaping, and reducing the overall amount of units. We also shifted this leg back so it's angled a little bit more in line with that property line, with the goal of really trying to create more of an open entrance into the site and not feel so crowded, and try to draw that back as far as possible from the neighboring properties. And it allowed us to, as you can see, there's a significant amount of increased landscaping and plantings throughout the site. We also eliminated the sidewalk that was originally shown on this side of the drive that some of the neighbors had concern of creating additional pedestrian traffic. By drawing this back, we were able to work with the grades better and bring the sidewalk over to this side, and eliminating hopefully that concern, and then increasing landscaping and buffering right here to protect the neighboring house at that location. Also, as mentioned, the dog run and tot lot were brought inside of the building, again, trying to provide more privacy to the neighboring residents. And we eliminated this pond by proposing an underground storage water storm management system to allow for more green space and recreational activity. A zoomed in site of the same current proposal. Again, now we're at 168 units. That's 56 one-bedrooms, 72 two-bedrooms, and 43 bedrooms, with a total of 286 parking stalls, bringing the total parking ratio up to 1.7, which we feel is more than adequate based on comparable projects we see in the market and other properties that we own and manage as well. So just a highlight of some of the major changes we made. We've decreased from 184 units to 168 units. The current density is, as Mr. Harlicker said, is 3.81. I do want to mention, I know that's probably the technical way to create or to calculate that, but our actual site boundary equals 4.6 acres. When you back out the easement, that gets it to 38.1. But if you look at the total 4.68 acres of our property, it's 35.8 units per acre. So, right or wrong, I mean, we've still done a pretty significant reduction in the units, and typically we see it calculated based on the total property site, regardless of easements. But again, raised the parking ratio from 1.46 to 1.7, created more green space and landscaping, relocation of the dog run, eliminating that sidewalk next to the neighboring house, and creating more buffering for the neighbors and privacy fencing. This is just a perspective of the project from the highway side. Exterior materials, high quality materials, masonry, Energy Star windows, CFB, and metal panel accents. This is an example, I believe we showed this last time, but this is an example of a project we recently finished just to show you the type of quality of the units that we are proposing. Although they're affordable housing units, they are of market rate comparable quality. Granite solid surface countertops, 9-foot ceilings, stainless steel appliances. We also designed these, very energy efficient with low flow water fixtures, LED lighting, high efficiency mechanical systems. We will be meeting Minnesota Green Community standards and Energy Star, which is just another a number of items go into achieving that level of sustainability. We're working with a group called White Group that partners with Excel Energy to do what's called an energy design assistance program, where they review kind of what a baseline project is and then where we are with these type of projects, and kind of weigh that to compared to other projects to make sure we're achieving certain sustainability levels to meet and exceed what's called SB 2030, which is a sustainability goal that's established in the industry. And then again, we'll have full-time on-site management, secured entrances, community room. We're proposing a rooftop deck on the single-story entrance to the project as well, fitness center, tot lot and dog run, and underground parking. And just a few examples of other projects that we have under construction right now that are all also affordable, but just to kind of highlight the quality of project that we are confident we're building. So, and with that, I can answer any questions.
Commission? Any questions right now?
Chair Schwartz, I have a question.
Commissioner Nowak?
The only question I have, which may surprise a lot of people, but the one question I have is from Mr. Hanson, the city engineer, April 10th. Did you receive that? Are you familiar with it?
I don't know that I have, but I can try to, one of us can try to answer, or we can
Well,
get you an answer.
in general, maybe it's for Mr. Harlicker as well, but my only concern is it's been a month, if, having reviewed over the engineer comments, if those comments are reasonable and feasible.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, they
Oh,
are?
yes.
Okay, that's it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Casey?
I wanted to ask, I know, the number of bike racks, I think it was in front of the building at the main entrance. How many are there now, or what have you done with that kind of a feature?
There still would be 6 bike
6.
racks. Yep,
Same
like we,
as
yep,
before.
exactly. And then we'd also provide additional bike parking in the garage level.
Underground.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Commissioner Heikla?
I'm wondering if you can tell me what the dimensions are of that green activity area. Will it be large enough, for instance, to put up a volleyball net or anything of that sort?
If you can give me 1 minute here. Six- 60 by 50. It's kind of it's a triangular space. 60 by 50, somewhere in there.
60?
Yeah, it's kind of a weird triangular space.
So the length
Yeah,
going
length is
east and
about
west is 60 feet, is
Yeah.
what you're saying? And
Yeah.
then at the longest portion, it would be
Yeah.
50, and then you see it kind of angles down a little bit from there, so it's hard to get a
yeah.
100% accurate read, but.
I'm just wondering if it's going to be a functional area, if they're actually going to be able to do something there, or if it's just going to be green and
No, I mean I think you could play, catch. You could, you can do a little pickup
Bocce
game.
ball,
Yeah,
lawn
bocce
bowling.
ball.
We're planning on putting like a gazebo, seating gazebo down there as well, so.
I mean, you're not going to do a football game if that. Yeah.
So it kind of gets back to what we talked earlier about play area for, presumably will be quite a few children. And so they, this, if this area here would be large enough to accommodate or be a big enough play area for a number of children.
Well, I think.
Yeah, and we have a tot lot separate as well, and then, 60 by 50 is a fairly generous size space. I mean, I don't know the dimensions of a volleyball court, that's a good comment, or badminton, I mean, you can play badminton, I'm sure, and plenty of opportunities.
I have one more question if I can.
Go ahead.
Is there a particular reason why the tot lot is smaller than the dog lot? Or if there's an opportunity to switch those over?
We could make it bigger. I mean, the tot lots are usually like a fixed playground, that, kind of a climbing jungle gym type of a thing, if you, so we've just kind of reserved enough space for what's typical for that, and then leaving room for dogs to go to the bathroom and get
Will the
exercise.
tot lot be fenced?
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, yes.
And so will the dog run.
There's also an additional patio, kind of an outdoor patio right at the front entrance too, that would have, again, some grilling stations and things of that nature. So we're really trying to activate that center space of the site.
My other one question is, along the Highway 10, is there going to be a fence all along that area as well as those trees?
No.
We don't have one proposed right now. There's a lot of trees.
This, where it says start of a 6-foot white vinyl fence
Are we,
up here in the upper left corner.
Well, I think that might be
Is that the fence on the other side of the
that's on the
property?
other side, the privacy fence from the neighboring houses, I believe.
Okay, so the
on this
side,
side? Yeah.
the side facing Highway 10 will not be fenced, it will only be trees.
Right, we've added a significant amount of trees along that property line since the last meeting as well.
Just a little concerned if children run out there and find their way onto the highway.
Mr. Chair, I believe there is a MinDOT
MinDOT has a fence.
fence along.
Freeways require a
Existing
fence.
fence along the perimeter of the property. I think it's in MinDOT right away.
Yeah, that's not on our property.
Yeah, it must be in the MinDOT right away
I think
then.
MinDOT has that on all their right-of-ways, on freeways.
There's a small 4-foot chain link fence that runs along there.
silk
It
fence,
terminates
it's just for
across the
construction.
street, so existing site is not to- They stopped it, and there's no longer development. It doesn't continue all the way to 47.
Okay.
It's hard to see, it's black and it's overgrown and so.
Any other questions at this time?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Casey?
you talked about the dog lot being, dog walk being increased in size, so what is the dimension? How did that change? Yep, don't put your ruler away.
This one's square, so it should be easier to figure out.
Oh, actually, the dimensions are on here. 24 foot by 62, I believe that says. 62, yeah.
24 by 62?
Correct.
And then just offhand, what's the tot lot?
That is 41 by 21.
Okay. And I had a question about, you mentioned grills and barbecues were gonna go in, and where did you mean that was gonna happen?
That would be at the main entrance, so if you actually look at the plan, we could point to it here. Give us a second.
So right
Right there.
here.
Okay, so is there some cover from the weather at all over that front entrance, or just kind of an open?
That's an open patio, but it would
Yeah.
connect, there would be a door going to our, an indoor community room that would have a kitchen and seating area and fireplace likely in a nice area that kind of opens up out onto that area so they can be in and out.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
All right, we may have other questions for you later.
Sure. Thank you.
At this time, I will reopen the public hearing in planning case, where's my notes here? 19-5, the preliminary and final site plan for the 168 unit apartment at Springbrook and 94th Avenue. Anyone wish to speak at this public hearing? Please come up to the microphone, give your name and address for the record. Limit your comments to 5 minutes, please.
Your message, let everybody know that I could. Hi, my name is Brendan McShane. I'm the homeowner adjoining to the property to the west. I'm at 201 94th Avenue Northwest. I'd like to raise some concerns with the impact of the surrounding neighborhood, the lack of parks and public transportation, and the density. For the neighborhood impact, a 6-foot high fence is what's proposed in between my property and some of the adjoining properties to my north and the proposed development. That's the only real item there that's going to create a buffer between this proposal and the adjoining properties. On the other side of that 6-foot fence for myself is a retaining wall, 5-foot retaining wall, 13 parking spaces, and roughly, maybe a little bit less, 1,000 units of traffic per day. That's all going to be within about 20 feet of my lot line. I don't feel that that's a significant buffer, and a significant buffer is needed according to the design use flexibility requirements in the city code. In addition, I'm concerned with the impact the retaining wall and associated excavation will have on the existing trees on my lot line. So I have a lot of trees. My fence is probably set back 20 feet from my lot line. So I have a lot of trees in that gap that are really providing the only real buffer, vegetative buffer between me and this development. So if they clear cut their lot, put in a retaining wall and put in a fence, that's gonna, their retaining wall is coming down 5 feet. That's gonna chop all of the roots on every tree that I have coming up against that line. So a lot of those trees aren't going to be doing very good. They're not doing very good right now. They're going to be doing worse, and that's going to really cause an impact as far as a buffer goes for me. And I think that's going to reduce the vegetative buffer, and I don't feel like that fence is a real buffer between me and a 4-story building. I mean, these trees are the only thing that provides a nice overstory. As far as the green space goes, this revised proposal does include more areas of green and open space, but it doesn't provide the amount of space needed for a development of this size and this density. Last year, one of my neighbors had 4 children, would bike up and down the neighborhood. I would drive around them almost daily on my way home from work. With the traffic generated by this proposal, that won't be an option. We won't be able to have children using the road as a play area. They'll have to find other places to go. For the nearest park, isn't far away as the crow flies, but to get there you got to walk out of the neighborhood to the west, up to the north, and over to the east. Nearest park's 1.1 mile walk from this development, from this neighborhood. Second nearest park is 1.4 miles away. This development in the surrounding neighborhood doesn't have the space required to provide recreation areas for the number of new residents that will be in the neighborhood. Furthermore, public transit is not a viable option for the residents of this development. The nearest bus stop has limited service. I believe we talked about that in the meeting 2 months ago. And reaching the Northtown Transit Hub, again, requires a walk of over a mile. And lastly, my concern is with the density, most importantly. The current density for the surrounding neighborhood, which includes about 18 single-family homes, is approximately 1.1 units per acre. Proposed development has a density of 38.1 units per acre, which exceeds the requirements in city ordinances by about 27%. This development will bring the density for the immediate neighborhood as a whole to above 9 units per acre. It's including the development and all of the surrounding land use. So roughly 8-fold higher for the entire roughly 20-acre neighborhood. Even a small exceedance makes a big impact to us, even a small exceedance in density. So whether it's 30 or 34 or 38, every little increment, the whole neighborhood is at 1.18. If you're going 30 to 32, that's one thing. If you're going 32 to 38, that's a huge difference. That's another 30 homes or 30 units of density. 30 units could be 90 people. I mean, that's going to be more kids, more traffic, more everything. That's going to be huge on us. We moved into this neighborhood thinking we'd have something that would fit city ordinance. And this is so far above that it's really going to cause an impact to our way of life and our property values, et cetera. In my opinion, this level of density simply isn't fair to the families who already live here and who would prefer a development more in line with the city ordinances for this district. In summary, I believe this project will cause the excess negative impact to the surrounding neighborhood and should not be recommended for approval to the city council. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kimberly Will. I live on the second house closest to the property. As I spoke last time, my main concern still is children. If there's elderly there, with the amount of traffic, it's just not safe. Once again, there's, on this plan, there's no place for kids to play. They've also moved the apartments more towards the highways, so kids aren't going to be able to even run around the building anymore. There's only the fence by the highway, a 4-foot fence. We're putting in a 6-foot fence because my dog can climb over a 4-foot fence. And I picture, a 14, 15, 13-year-old climbing over the fence to go see what's down there. There's, like I mentioned last time, the parks are over a mile away, the school. Even, with the parking, most families nowadays have 2 cars. In this area, with there being the buses only running once every hour and then stopping, anyone who would work a possible second or third shift, they would have to have a car because there wouldn't be the public transportation to get them to and from during the later shifts. And so that there just brings up the need for more parking, which would end up on the street. Also, while they have put in more parking, if anybody has a neighbor or a friend, or say they are having a barbecue and bringing over 10 family members that have a car or something, then that right there, can take up 10 apartments, parking spots. So they've upped it, but they really haven't taken care of the side problems with that. And again, with the kids riding the bikes, with all that traffic coming through there, there's just no place to play. It's just, as I said last time, it's just too big. We want something back there in the neighborhood. We would love maybe like a 40-unit apartment, back there with a lot more open space, someplace where they could actually put a playground. A tot lot is good for kids up to maybe 5 or 6, but after that, these kids are going to roam. The minute they get bored, they get into mischief, like I said last time. Any kids living there, even teenagers, are going to roam, and they're going to look for someplace, something to do, and there's just nothing to do. Another thing is especially moving it more towards my direction, towards my home, down on the screen, I guess, is they're going to have to put in lights. And these are going to be very tall, street height lights to light up the parking lot all night long, to light up the sides of the buildings for safety purposes. And, basically anyone who lives behind there is all of a sudden going to have their entire backyards lit up 24/7, at nighttime. And it's just, especially Brendan's house, they're going to have to put up street lights for even the walking in and out, and just completely destroys my backyard for fire pits. I know that's just me personally, but a lot of the neighbors, we all have fire pits back there because it's nice and quiet. I don't see it any better. I don't see them fixing any of the problems. They've made maybe some small minor adjustments, but they haven't fixed the main problem of what are these kids gonna do? What are these people going to do to get to the bus? They say working class. My husband works from 2 to 11. If he had to take the bus, he could take it to work. He wouldn't be able to get home because the buses stop. So I would have to go and pick him up, which means my daughter, who also works, has to have her car. We have 3 cars in our family, and we have 4 people in our home just because of the working. And again, any friends come over, but I guess my main worry is kids. I'm a mom. I have 4 godchildren, 2 great godchildren. They're younger, and if they come to my house, when my godkids come over, if they want to ride their bikes in the streets, having cars back and forth, I'm going to not let them do that because I'll just be scared to death that a car won't see them. And if you have cars parking along one side of the road because friends come to visit and there's no parking and they park on the street, that crunches it in even more. And so that's just my main concern. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak?
Hi, my name is Paul Will. I'm Kim's husband, again at 213 94th. The problem that I'm seeing with this is on the eastern side. Has an environmental study been done on what's going to need to happen to get rid of the ticks out of those woods? Right now we have in our backyard, going to be gently moved, is a possum. Possums eat massive amounts of ticks, so there's at least one family. However, putting this in, I can see Lyme disease, I can see dogs just covered with ticks. And anybody on that eastern edge is going to be, if they're outside, they're gonna have to have something. Now, is the property prepared to pay that environmental cost? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak at the public hearing?
Hi, I'm Shawnee Sheriff. I live in 236 94th Avenue. And my concern, our few concerns, first of all, traffic. And our neighborhood, Flintwood Street and 94th Avenue, everybody has a reverse exit getting out of their driveway. And being heavy traffic, it's very hard to get out of that driveway and get hit by or wait for a long time to get out. Other concern that it's once this project begins, it's going to be very, very hard for us to live there with construction noise, truck haulings and everything. That's very disturbing for us, construction. We have very peaceful neighborhood, 16 houses, very nice, peaceful, quiet neighborhood. Like to have, Les is like, it is peaceful now. So we don't want to go through this issue of problems that going to come up with this construction. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name is Lilas Anderson. I live at 224 94th Avenue Northwest. The first time this was presented to the Planning Commission, it was defeated by a 5-2 margin. And I thought that was fairly decisive, so I was surprised to see that it keeps coming back to haunt us. One person in our neighborhood wondered, in fact, if the city plans and then seeks a developer, or if the developer comes with their plan and the city goes to extraordinary lengths to accommodate the developer. And then also I wondered about the permeable versus impermeable impact on that property because of the size of the building for one thing, and also the parking lot and water issues that could arise from that. And then earlier it was alluded to future development in the port, and I'm just wondering what plan there is for that. It would be nice to know for long-range planning, or not so long-range planning. The area has had other plans in the past that have gone by the wayside for one reason or another. At one time there was a office building proposed, not on that site directly, but nearby. And they went to extraordinary lengths to clear the trees out on a Sunday, no less, before we called the cops. And that apartment, or that office building was never built. And then there was the previous plan for this special property that's being considered now. And the entrance was right across from our front yard, and luckily that was never built. So it's been so nice to see the neighborhood resurrected after homes were occupied by, I don't know if they were squatters or relatives of the owners or what they were, but they were in and out almost monthly in that neighborhood. And it's so nice now to look at Brendan's property lit up at night, and Kim's, and that property looking really good at night. It looks like a really comfortable, nice neighborhood at long last, and now here we are again. So, future development on the port is a little scary. I just hope that they involve us in it. After all, we are property owners there and taxpayers. And all in all, it reminds me of a story that I used to read to my granddaughter at night of Cinderella and her stepsisters. It's like we're trying to fit big feet into a glass slipper, and I just don't see it. and I hope you'll consider voting against it.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak at the public hearing? Final call, anyone else wish to speak? Seeing none, close the public hearing. Mr. Herlicker, perhaps do you have a map of the area so you could show these folks when they're saying future development of the port, what area we're talking about?
Well,
It's
it
not
does-
necessarily their neighborhood.
I do not have a map of the port, but it includes this whole triangle north of Coon Rapids Boulevard. It extends down to Foley and Coon Rapids Boulevard, and then on the south side down to Highway 47 and a distance down Springbrook Drive.
So when they're talking about future aid with future development in the port, it's all along Coon Rapids Boulevard, all the way back to Foley,
Correct.
and down in the Springbrook Drive area, not necessarily their neighborhood.
Right.
So I hope that answers some of the questions a little bit.
I don't believe it goes south, Coon Rapids Boulevard.
I'm sorry, sir, but it does. All right, is there anything the petitioner would like to answer after hearing concerns from the public?
It's okay.
Certainly.
First, I'd like to correct myself. Commissioner Casey, I apologize, I used the wrong scale. It's actually a 60 by 100 green space, that triangular area that we're talking about. So, my apologies.
60 by 100?
100, yes.
Perhaps you could give your name again for
Oh, yeah, of course.
Secretary.
Yep, Petro Megitz, Cost Wilson Architects. You need an address?
Thank you.
In regards to some of the lighting, there is a photometric. We make sure that the lights do not spill past the property boundary. That is a requirement of the city ordinances. So we met those criteria. I just want to go through here.
Yeah, I guess Patrick Ostrom with Real Estate Equities. The comment about the water issues and impervious versus non-impervious, the plans are all submitted and reviewed by the Coon Creek Watershed District and need to be approved by them as well prior to receiving building permits and building. So that goes back to the underground stormwater management that we're proposing, and that'll be submitted to them and approved as well.
Yep. And so basically, we treat all the water on site, then it would be collected into the regional stormwater system. We have submitted to Watershed, we're waiting for a response. I don't believe there was anything else. I guess other than the one clarifying item for the retaining wall with the fence on the top, we're basically, you'd be looking at about a roughly 11-foot high visual barrier between the adjacent properties and our property. So somewhere in that range.
Thank you.
By the time you get a 6-foot tall fence on top of, a 3 to 5, it kind of varies as we kind of move along, so.
And any comment about
Oh.
your affecting the roots of his existing trees?
Doug, he's the landscape architect, he could probably speak to this a little bit.
Hi, I'm Doug Loken. I work for Laux. I'm the landscape architect on this project. If I'm looking correctly, there's approximately 6 or 7 trees on the gentleman's property that are somewhat adjacent to our wall, where we are approximately 10 feet off of the property line. And I believe one of those is actually within the drip line of one of those trees. The rest are significantly far away. So except for that one tree, I don't see any problem with damaging any of those roots. We could certainly look further if you would wants us to look at trees and where the locations of some of these walls would be. We definitely go out to the site and discuss that and see what we can do.
Thank you. And, excuse me, Commission, any questions at this time for petitioners, Mr. Harlicker, or discussion? Commissioner Knobloch.
I have some questions for Mr. Harlick. I think he'd be best to answer it. First question I have. This plot has been undeveloped for how long, to your recollection?
At least 13 years. I don't know that it's ever been developed.
Okay. My second question is, this area, the neighborhood is in the Port District, is that correct?
Correct.
Is it deemed entirely residential?
It's a mix of
Mixed use.
residential and I believe also commercial mixed use.
All right. Another question, that third question, you being familiar, being in the planning, the planning commission, right across the creek, is there not a hotel, a Holiday Inn?
Yes, there is.
Just below that Holiday Inn, is there not another hotel, a Comfort Inn or something?
Yeah, there's a hotel combination restaurant
Oh, yeah.
going south towards.
And just beside that, isn't there a business offices now that are converted to hotel? Right along Coon Rapids Boulevard?
No, those are still offices.
There's still offices,
Yeah.
okay. And my last question that I have is I commend everyone for coming in and sharing their comments, and that's important. It's very difficult on the planning commission when there isn't participation and people don't voice. That there's this constant issue, it's not in my backyard. But not feeling like you're not being heard or your perspective is not valued is worse. I always like to end all my questions in a comment with one final. The city owns one parcel in the neighborhood. With the participation here, I'm sure, can't guarantee anything, but I can only suggest that parcel of land, if there is no park space in a walking distance, that the city should be approached and the community can try to get that lot designated as a park. If more people are going to be moving into the neighborhood, more families, that may isolate this area. It's may not work, it may work, but it is something feasible to consider. And that's something that the planning commission can only vote on, but it's something that has more impact if the neighborhood approaches city council and see if that fits in with the Coon Rapids plan. So that's it, and now you don't have to listen to me anymore.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Geisler.
For the applicant, you provided an excellent lighting diagram here. I wanted to check on the exterior lights. Are you aware, are those models that you're proposing, are those dark sky compliant by any chance, or are you aware of that?
They will be, yes, they will be.
Okay, and do you, for the benefit of everyone, so dark sky, what's the point of doing that, or why would you make those selections for those types of lights?
Once again, so you wouldn't have lights, so you wouldn't have basically the experience of a auto lot, so you wouldn't have a lot of glowing lights everywhere, and therefore you could see stars.
So trying to avoid the stadium bloom effect, when
Exactly.
Friday night lights type of thing.
Exactly.
Okay, great, very much. Great, thank you for answering that.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Schmucky.
question for Mr. Harlinger. There have been a lot of comments about the traffic on 94th and Springbrook and I think other adjacent roads in the area. So the question I have is, number one is, what are, or do we know if there are or will be any parking restrictions on those streets?
Commissioner Schmolke, at this point, there aren't parking restrictions. They're typical City of Coon Rapids residential streets. At this point, I don't know of any restrictions that are being proposed.
Okay.
Sometimes that's driven by neighbors requesting it in certain situations, or property owners requesting it in certain situations.
Good to know. So, I mean, I personally lived in an apartment complex where that's exactly they did add certain restrictions so that there was limited parking on the roads during certain hours, during certain seasons, obviously. So thank you for clarifying that.
Maybe to elaborate a little bit on that, they do have the typical winter parking
Sure.
restrictions
Sure.
that limit overnight parking.
The other component, and this is to the applicant as well, and I really wouldn't even bring this up except the fact that I think it was on your presentation. You shared with us some pictures of other apartment complexes that you're building. And I happened to see that one of them indicated that the number of units, correct me if I'm wrong, was 144. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's correct.
So the question I have, it's really hard, but you know, clearly we're hearing, you guys did a great job. I really appreciate all the work that you guys put into making the changes, and, you know, listening to us, listening to the residents. You clearly have come back and you are definitely making an attempt to make things better. Just the dog run area being moved, I think the locale of that is a lot smarter. The tot lot, the opening up with the additional parking spaces, I think moving back that entrance into the parking, underground parking is substantial as well. I like the green activity area. You guys made a lot of great improvements. You did show, though, this other unit that's 144. You talked last time about, you know, financially, it's like you have to make sure the numbers make sense, and I get that. But since there's so much concern about the density, I just, again, want to bring up the question, why do we have to go over the permitted number of units? One resident did make the comment that, you know, they thought that maybe someday an apartment complex would probably go in there, but their expectation was that it would be a much smaller size. So I just wondered if you could maybe address that and respond to that.
Yeah, sure. The project you're referring to, that was 144 units, was actually an adaptive reuse of a historic building.
Okay.
So we also received federal and state historic tax credits to finance that, which was a significant amount of equity going into that project to help pay for it. It was also, the transaction was closed on prior to the finalizing of corporate tax reform, which unless you want me to get into the details, but
No.
the pricing of tax credit equity after tax reform came down by 30% probably. So the financing that we get to pay for these projects was impacted drastically by the federal change in tax law. So the amount of equity we generate off of these projects is significantly lower, which is another reason why, excuse me, why we need more units now to get that economies of scale to make the financing feasible.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mhm.
I've got a couple of questions for the applicant. I believe you possibly addressed this at the previous hearing, but underground parking under the building is an additional charge, is that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
How much?
$75 a month.
So you've got 168 units, and you've got 117 stalls outside, surface stalls. Just taking into account one car per unit, that's a shortage of 51 stalls. Where would 51 people park if nobody wants to pay $75 for parking?
Well, truthfully, they wouldn't have a place to park and they wouldn't rent here, probably. And we've surveyed a number of other properties affordable with underground parking. They charge in the $75 to $85 range, and their parking of the amount of stalls they have, they're in the 90 to 95% of them are actually leased. So we're finding in the market, it is a significant amount of people do want those underground parking stalls, and it's not out of the fact that it's the only option. I think it's probably more so we live in Minnesota and winter months, snow. I mean, as everyone knows, it's not enjoyable to go scrape your cars in the winter, so I think people still choose to do it for that, for some of those reasons.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Heikland.
I'm wondering, I was in the hotel business for a number of years, and I know what it's like in the winter to try to get a parking lot cleared so you can remove the snow. You have very little, or if any, place to push snow. So how will you deal with that?
We hire third-party snow removals when we have sites that don't have anywhere to store snow on site. They'll come and remove it and haul it off-site.
So all of the snow will be
Taken off-site to a different location, yep.
And Commissioner, any other questions for the applicant, Mr. Hardiker? Commissioner Heikler?
I have one more quick question about the number of bike racks. So the total is 16, is that correct? You said 10 underground and 6?
Yeah, is that where we ended up underground, or?
Yeah, I mean, we can add more.
Yeah, we could.
Yeah, there's.
We could find room to add more in the basement, I'm sure. That's kind of just where we landed.
Six exterior parking spaces does not seem very much for a facility that large.
Again, we do have space, we can add another 6, we can just double, have one big back.
We could, yeah, so we could fit more exterior. I mean, our goal, based on the last one, was to try to increase the parking ratio, based on a lot of the comments we got. So if we started adding more biking, we'd probably have to give up, depending on how many we go, we'd lose parking stalls as we started adding more.
Would residents have to pay to park their bicycles underground?
No. No, they wouldn't.
But you do charge for storage?
Yeah, and those are all optional charges.
And there's typically, a bike fix-it station, so you can repair your bicycle, pump up the tire. I mean, the typical you would see in any market rate project right now.
Anyone else? Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commission, your thoughts? Commissioner Geisler.
So first off, I would like to really thank the applicant for putting their nose to the grindstone on this. We gave you a lot of tough comments, and you have a not quite square site with not a great easement set that you have managed to really address, in my opinion, at least to some extent, every comment we gave you at the first meeting. Whether or not it's perfect or all the way of what we wanted, besides the point, but everything, there's movement on every one of these items. Seeing density come down to, and then also parking come up, rough math, thinking that if you've got one car in the 1 bedrooms and 2 cars for the 2 or 3 bedrooms, that's 280 stalls, you've got 285. So in total, so I'm looking at that going, that passes my smell test of, roughly does that fit car space. I personally, one of the things that I didn't mention previously, but you ended up doing, moving the top lot inside and effectively away from the traffic pattern of your parking lot, good move. Little kids even fenced in still are gonna get around. I think that's great. Same thing with the dogs. Moving them away from the traffic pattern is great. Increasing the green area, is it as big as a city park? No, but it is an on-site green space. It is not insignificant. It's way more than what we're planning on the first time, and it's way more than currently. I mean, the site doesn't have any green space really, because it's not usable. So I really do appreciate that. I also appreciate the fact that this is a good-looking building. You broke up your sight lines all the way through. This truly does meet a need. There is a need for affordable housing in not only Grand Rapids, but in the metro. This is a need of citizens, of prospective citizens. This is a need for long-term growth. We don't have a whole lot of green space left to go in some places, and this is a unique opportunity to increase our density in a mindful manner. Yes, there will be challenges. Yes, there's concerns. I think there's definitely an opportunity there, since you guys are planning to own and operate this in the long term, to be good neighbors with each other, and to be communicative and to work. I think that's great, whether it's an apartment building, whether it's a housing development or whatever, office complex. Having good neighbors is always a valuable thing, and if you're going to be here for the long haul, always be mindful of that. But with that, I really do give you credit and kudos for taking that in and moving this as far forward as you have to really address most of the core concerns that are here. Thank you.
Commissioner Bradley.
I also compliment you on the changes that you made, but I do have concerns with this. The density is still kind of high. It's 127% of the maximum density. The code is for harmony with the neighborhood, but it's also for the people that are going to be living in those units that are going to be constituents here of the city. We're packing them in kind of when we go so much higher on the density. You're also going for another flexibility on another code issue too, with the parking. And that's only about 75% of the code minimum. And again, that's kind of a disservice to the people that would become the residents of this facility. Along with not having great access to public transit, not having easy access to a public library, not having easy access to a park. While affordable housing is a great need here, I don't think it's fair for us to lower our standards just to bring in more affordable housing. And it's not fair to those future residents to put them into these kind of restrictions. And based on that, I cannot support this as it's proposed.
Thank you.
Chair Schwartz.
Commissioner Knobloch.
Everyone was quite excited when Illini developed their 500-unit call center within about a half a mile of this neighborhood. There is going to be challenges in all developments. Nothing is perfect, and there are some imperfections, as with all. But when you weigh the difference between the benefits and the shortcomings, overall, I would easily vote for this plan, as the benefits going forward for Coon Rapids in all neighborhoods, that they're, in the long term, I think it will be better for all. I think it will actually, the few minor objections, and I shouldn't say they are minor, they are major to the neighborhood and to residents, but this is not per case a residential neighborhood as based on its, by the city's designation. Now, there are a lot of good benefits, and I think in time, there are developments like I recommended. If the neighborhood is to remain perhaps a park, other services should be considered for this neighborhood, which the tax base and your taxes will go down. This will help develop the area for other areas and other means. So I think that's something to keep in mind in consideration. And I can understand that the standards, but the city planning department approves this. I approve it, and I think with consideration, if you look at all the plus and minuses of it, I hope that you would, that on the commission would think there are more pluses than minuses in this application, so I'll be voting for it.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Casey?
So I'll reiterate what's been said about, we sure appreciate your efforts to address this, and you extended it well into 2 months. You took one look at it and, you know, put the brakes on in April and then brought it back to us this month. So you had a lot of balls in the air. I'm juggling, you know, taking second, third looks at this. I appreciate that. That's not easy. That's a lot of time and money for your firm. The site's challenging, no question. And I don't think even what we're seeing with the improvements, I don't think it's perfect. I don't think that can be. But I will, that being said, I'll go back to my original thinking in March when I did support this project. And that is, it is a good fit for the Port Evergreen neighborhood. And that's, I sound like a realtor, but it's location, location, location. And the fact that it is affordable housing, which is sorely needed in our city. Industrial caliber jobs come out of that Port Evergreen area. And it's been mentioned that Alina's call center is going to add approximately 500 jobs. Those people who are going to fill these jobs, they want to live close to where they work because that's something we all like. It cuts down our commute, it cuts down our costs. And it's not right next to the Northtown Transportation Hub, but it is doable. And I think that's a plus too. So I think the density, that makes some people uncomfortable, but I think we made an exception in a couple other projects here in the city where we saw the need, we waived the density and said it's a good thing, it's doable. Parking is its own issue, but you have increased that parking past the 1.5 ratio or threshold that seemed to impact other projects that you've talked about. So that's, in my mind, that's okay. I think that's what I needed to say, but I favored it in March. I'm going to support it again tonight.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Heikler?
I will echo and say that, I thank you all for your modifications, everything that you've done. And like Commissioner Casey said, it's been a lot of time and effort for you and for your company, and we do appreciate that. I, however, still have an issue with how big this project is for that area. So I, along kind of in agreement with my fellow commissioner to the left, that it is too much for this area, and I will not be voting in favor of it.
I will echo everything that the other commissioners have said, thanking you for your efforts with trying to answer the points that we brought forward to you 2 months ago. First, let me go back a second. Let me thank the citizens for coming to the meeting, voicing your thoughts. Without you coming here and telling us what you think, our job is really difficult. So thank you. But now back to what I was talking about. Thank you for the work you've done trying to fit this into the mold that we tried to give you 2 months ago. However, I do still have concerns on certain issues. To be a workforce location, you have to have better transit service than what this facility has servicing to it. If everybody worked a day job, transit would be sufficient. But you've got a lot of people that work second and third shift, and has been previously pointed out, after I believe it's 9, 10 o'clock at night, there are no buses. How do you get home? Or if you work third shift, how do you get to work? Transit isn't gonna solve your issue. Parking, I believe, is still an issue. The city has a ordinance requirement of 2.25. You were initially at 1.22, I believe, or 1.4, and you've come up to 1.7? I feel that that's still far short. As some of the citizens have pointed out, what if residents have a party and have a graduation party for their son that just graduated from high school? They've got 20, 30 people coming over for a party. Where are these people gonna park? With the minimum parking requirements or numbers that you have, you barely would qualify just for the residents. So I don't think that the parking is sufficient for this size of a facility. Density, I still have a problem with the 35.8. Again, city ordinance has it at 30 per acre, and the city put that number there for a reason, because they feel that that's what's good for the neighborhoods. This is trying to fit way too much into too small of an area in a residential neighborhood with the size of the lot that you have available to you. Again, it's been pointed out that parks, the closest park is mile and a half away. There's just nowhere for the kids to play. You've got, what, a 60 by 100 or something thereabouts for a play area for 168 units. You're probably gonna have, you're gonna have 150 kids in that building probably, or close to it. Granted, some of them are gonna be small toddlers and what have you. You've got the tot lot for that. But teenagers, even 6, 8, 10-year-olds, there's no place for them to play. So just all in all, there's just far too many points that are against this project, so I will be voting against this project. Anyone else have anything?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Schmolke.
So you did kind of spark a couple things, a couple thoughts that I wanted to share. So I think that my major concern is the density. I really do. If I was living in that neighborhood and a structure of this size was being added to the neighborhood, it would be disappointing, I think, and I would be questioning, it's like, oh, is this the neighborhood I want to live in? I have to say, it's like I have not driven through there recently, so I'm a little struggling with really the complexity or the size of this building relative to the neighborhood. So I feel like I'm talking a little bit tongue-in-cheek. I'm not so worried about the parking. I've lived in apartments. I understand that there is a lot of open parking spots, and it's like not every apartment has the maximum number of anticipated cars. So I really don't think that the parking is an issue. I do feel like if there is overspill, that there is actions that the neighborhood can take to work with the city to get some parking restrictions put on the roads for them to make it a little bit easier, so that there isn't so much congestion. I think that there is a lot of resolutions, even with the playground. I live in a neighborhood now that there is a playground. There's no playground immediately around us. And I don't see that as an issue for the kids playing. Granted, it's a residential area, so at least they can play in yards and so forth. But I think, neighborhoods, not every neighborhood has the luxury of a playground that's right there and adjacent to, to the majority of the homes. I think the big thing for me is the density. That's where I'm truly struggling, and that's why I asked the question about the 144 units. I'm going to throw the question out there one more time, because I think too, for all the things that we've brought up tonight, if the vote were to go no, right? If our recommendation is no, and the applicant walked away, and another opportunity came through with somebody offering to build another apartment complex where the density is not the issue. Okay, for all the things that we've talked about, there's still the traffic on the streets, there's still playground access, there's the ability to get to transportation. All those things aren't prime, and like a number of us have said, it is not perfect, right? So I'm challenging a little bit to think about those aspects, and it's like, how would you vote if it was another situation, and really what is the major concern here? And I think that we need to consider that. I'm leaning towards declining just because of the density. I'll let you know in a minute. That's where I'm at.
Commissioner Geisler.
If I may make one minor comment regarding the transit. So sitting on the Transportation Advisory Board as a citizen member from that council, we had a presentation literally yesterday about the integrated nature of planning and transit planning. And it truly is a chicken and the egg problem. You can't send buses where there aren't citizens because that's a waste of taxpayers' money. But you can't have high density where there isn't necessarily transit to serve it. And it does have to be a planful and mindful thing. This is something that is being tackled at the Met Council level. That is something that is being planned for Metro bus services. They are aware of these things, and they try to make those plans as they can, but they need to see the guidance as well from cities to say, we are planning to make density changes. We need to then therefore have transit changes come along with them in plans behind them. You can change a bus route a little faster than you can build a building. And so I hesitate to stand on transit. As it stands, if this building magically appeared tomorrow, transit is inefficient for servicing the area, frankly, as it stands. But that's not what's going to happen. We do have time here. We do have considerations to work at. And there are lots of folks that can be notified down at Metro Council who are going to be who can work those buses. On top of that, we also have our local options as well as ride sharing that's available as far as the smaller buses and Metro Mobility. Those are also available. Speaking to the density conversation, I look at the apartments that we put up right along by Arby's and Walgreens on the boulevard there that are the over 65 apartments that are there. Those are literally across the street from homes. There's no shielding, there's no baffling. There's a couple oak trees and they are across the street from single family homes. We haven't shied away from doing density right in the middle of a neighborhood where it made sense. Yes, there are some other considerations for that site, but that's one site that comes to mind because I drive by it all the time. I do think there is a need here. I question the need of a cap of a 30 max for the districts. I don't know if I fully understand why there is an upper end to the density because there doesn't seem to be a bracket above that. Whether or not that's not our place to make that decision, but without guidance that says you can go above, that says nothing can ever be higher than 30 in the city without a waive, which seems like it's not quite matching what the intent and some of the communication, what we're talking about here, which is what I think the staff is recommending here. And I think we're wandering away a little bit of the fact that the staff thinks this is a good thing. The city thinks this is a good thing. And they've spent a lot of time on this. They spent a lot of time with the applicants. I believe the citizens have talked to the city quite a bit as well. There's been a lot of feedback flowing on this. You know, I think we hear that there is a density concern, but at some point we have to also increase density. We can't always stay the same density if we want to continue to grow as a city. And those are some things that I would just like to point out as a final piece, because I do think that while this is a challenging project, while it may not be ideal, it does really further the goals of the city as a whole. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
I know
that one of the residents had mentioned they were surprised that this was coming back after a 5-2 vote the last time. I was wondering, before we do take a vote, can you just explain, again, to the point that Mr. Knobloch made about, we really appreciate hearing your comments. It helps us so much in the decision-making process. If this doesn't go the way that they intend or would like to see it go, what is the next step in the process so they understand what happens next?
Well, if this,
Like, we are making a recommendation for approval,
if this
correct?
passes our board, our commission, it's a recommendation to the city council, and the city council makes the final decision. And even if we vote it down, it still goes to the city council. City council will still hear it at their June 4th meeting. So your future input would be to the city council, no matter which way the vote goes here this evening.
And the city council will take everything, all the comments that were made, the presentations, the commission's comments and so forth, into consideration.
So
Thank you.
nobody has anything further? Is there a motion?
Chair Schwartz?
Commissioner Knobloch.
I have a motion in planning case 19-5 that the planning commission move to recommend approval of the proposed preliminary and final site plan with the following conditions as listed 1 through 9. Unless you want me to read them out.
May I interject?
Minus 7 and 8.
-7 and 8.
There we go. So 1 through 6 and 9.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Knobloch, second by Geisler. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
No, aye.
Nay?
Aye.
Let's try this again. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and raise your hand.
I was going to suggest that.
Those opposed? Nay? Motion carries 4-3 with Commissioners Bradley, Heikela, and Schwartz opposed. This is a recommendation by the Planning Commission and will be heard by the City Council at their June 4th meeting. Thank
Excuse me,
you.
Chair Schwartz, does the motion to approve include the findings for approving flexibility? Maybe you should include that in your motion.
Motioner?
I'll revisit that in my motion, that it also includes use and design flexibility.
And seconder agrees?
Yes.
And those in favor all agree?
Aye.
Yes, aye.
All right. Thank you. right, our next case is planning case 19-10. A request for dimensional flexibility for impervious coverage, parking stall length, and parking setback at 3050 Coon Rapids Boulevard, Alina Health. Mr. Harlicker.
Yeah, Chair and Commissioners, Mercy Hospital has been working with Coon Creek Watershed District and the City of Coon Rapids Engineering Department developing a comprehensive stormwater management plan for the hospital. Essentially, the last phase in this comprehensive plan is installing an underground stormwater management system. And that system will be kind of located in the southeast corner here. This is a location map, and this is Dakota Street here and 115th Avenue here. Those changes will take place in this area here. What's being proposed is to take this existing situation here, which includes parking and an open stormwater basin, and converting it to an underground system. By doing that, this area here would be filled in. The stormwater system will be located underneath that. And then once that is done, the hospital is proposing to install additional parking where that pond used to be. In order to do that, they need dimensional flexibility for increasing the impervious coverage, for having parking stalls that are 18 feet deep, and having a curb line and parking that encroaches into the setback requirements. First off, I'd like to outline the impervious coverage. They're asking for dimensional flexibility to increase the impervious coverage as a result of this project. Maximum impervious coverage is 80%. Currently, the coverage is 81.5%. This proposed project will increase it up to 85%. Dimensional flexibility can be approved, provided it will result in better integration of uses or additional public amenities. This proposal will provide a better integration of uses, and it will provide a needed change for stormwater management. It will bring the existing, there really isn't a system, but it will bring stormwater management on the hospital site into compliance with current standards, and it will allow the dual use of the area. Stormwater management can be controlled, and that creates additional parking opportunity, and so you can better integrate the two uses with the hospital. The hospital has identified a need, and I'm sure many are aware of that. Parking is a shortage at times on the hospital's property, and this would add parking to that. The second area of flexibility is parking stall dimensions. The city's requirement is parking stalls 9 feet by 20 feet. If they aren't overhanging, if they're face to face. The applicant is proposing parking stalls 9 by 18. That is consistent with all the other parking stalls in this parking lot. If they were to install parking stalls that comply with current requirements, you'd have significant changes in drive aisles. Drive aisles would go from 24 feet wide down to 22 feet. And you'd have significant jogs, which would create an unsafe situation. So by allowing the 18-foot parking stalls, they would allow the new parking stalls to be better integrated into the existing parking lot. And the last area of flexibility is for the parking along this street line here along 115. Currently, the actual property boundary goes south of 115. The city does have a parking easement that extends from the middle of the road 30 feet to the north, so it brings it approximately in here somewhere. So a 20-foot setback requirement would create a significant jog in that curb line and significant changes in the traffic flow in that parking lot. And so what they are requesting is dimensional flexibility to allow the curb line to be continued in its current location, which is right here. What that does, it brings the parking lot within a 5-foot encroachment into the easement. City engineer has reviewed this proposal, and he believes that because of the area there where 115th is, right now it's currently a gravel road, any improvements to 115th could be accomplished with the curb line being continued as it currently exists. Staff has also looked at landscaping and look at this as an opportunity to fill in gaps in landscaping in this area. Once the project is completed, staff can meet with the applicant and fill in gaps where trees are missing. They're also recommending that additional shrubs be planted to kind of fill in underneath the evergreen trees. With that, staff is recommending, the Planning Commission recommend approval of dimensional flexibility for impervious coverage, parking stall dimensions, and parking setback from 115th Avenue, based on the findings contained in the staff report. The engineer and representative from the hospital are also here tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Harlicker. Commission, any questions for Mr. Harlicker?
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Schmolke?
So one quick question, is there going to be an inlet out for the, driveway in and out to this area, or is it just going to be parking?
Yeah, Commissioner Schmolke, no changes in access to the site.
That's what I want to say.
Hearing no other questions at this time, the petitioner like to make a presentation?
Good evening, Chair, Commissioners. My name is Nick Mannell with Laux. I'm the principal engineer on the project. I have with me Bob Hill with Alina. I can give you kind of the background, a little further background on the kind of impetus for the project. When we came before you for the previous project at Alina with the parking garage and the addition in the back, at that time in discussions with the watershed district, and actually going back to the Mother Baby project with the watershed district, the watershed expressed their desire to have the site be brought up to current stormwater management standards. The pond that's located at the back of the site takes water off of the parking lots that run kind of from north to south down into that pond. But at the time, much of the water from the rest of the site drained kind of around that pond in underground piping. And so the pond was functioning for a portion of the site, but even for the portion of the site that it was serving, it didn't meet modern day standards. So with the ramp and the addition project that we were most recently before you with, we added in a underground stormwater system in the front entry, the new front entry. There's an infiltration basin in the center of the drive, and then there's an underground pipe system there. And that was presented as kind of phase one of this overall comprehensive stormwater management system. And what we presented to the watershed district at the time was that we would follow on that phase one with a phase two or a phase three, which we've combined together to be this project that we're before you with today, to finalize the system and bring the overall campus, all 30 acres, into compliance with current stormwater management regulations. The existing pond at the south, as I mentioned, only serves a portion of the parking lots that's back there, But as I mentioned, the piping for the rest of the site kind of run around this area. And so we're able to bring all of those together into this underground system that's being proposed to treat the entire site. The rest, I should say, the rest of the site that's not being treated by the system that's up in the entry area. So the system that's shown on the screen is made up of 7-foot diameter pipes that are perforated and placed underground. The stormwater drains into it through sedimentation manholes that filter out the sediment and any grit that's captured on the parking lot or in the runoff. And then it's brought into these pipes for infiltration into the ground. And then everything above of a certain outlet level will be discharged into the city storm sewer and run off as it is today. But that allows that grit and that runoff to come out of that storm water, allows a significant amount of water to be infiltrated back into the ground, which are all goals and requirements of modern day stormwater management systems. So that's the purpose of the project. In addition to the stormwater management features of the project, the hospital has identified a need for additional parking due to shift changes. During the shift change periods, their parking is very constrained. And there's, even with the new ramp, and there's concerns that as they grow and as they add additional staff at those shift change periods, it's going to start pushing people out into the neighborhoods for parking. When people have to get to work, they're going to park somewhere and they're going to go to work. And if they can't find a spot on campus, they're going to find a spot. And so Alina is working to try to make sure that the workers that are coming into work have a place to park, have a place for them to get to work efficiently, and that it's all located on campus and out of the neighborhoods, which we believe would be a problem for the neighbors. That's kind of the presentation as to why we're going about the project, so I can answer any questions.
Commission, any questions? Petitioner? Commissioner Bradley?
Sir, how many parking spaces will this revision add?
It adds, I think
191.
Yeah, the report says 191. Several of those are kind of reconstructed existing, so I think the actual net add is in like the 186 range, but it's real close to that 190.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Oh, Commissioner Heichel, I'm sorry.
I'm sure you guys are all far more intelligent than I and are looking at your long-term, more farther out long-term parking. What happens when this lot fills up? I mean, do you have plans in the pipeline to perhaps add a storied parking lot or something?
There's been no definitive plans or long-term planning as far as this is the structure we would build. But the front ramp was built with the capacity to go up additional floors. I believe it was reduced by a floor during the final design. So that would be an opportunity. But the hospital does believe that this additional parking will resolve their foreseeable need for parking.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Geisler?
So these stalls are primarily, would you say primarily for employee and staff, not so much for customers? They're generally, customers are parking closer?
I believe so. I can let Bob kind of address that as well.
Yeah.
Sure. These spaces are all for staff and contractors that work at the hospital. We have about 3,000 employees at Mercy Hospital, working multiple shifts, of course. And one of our big concerns, like Nick said, is our 3 p.m. shift right now. Right now, if I drive my car in there at 3 p.m., there are some days where it'll take me 10 to 15 minutes to find a parking spot. It's just that shift. It's not all the time. This will help alleviate that and take care of those concerns also. Did I address your question?
Yeah, and I one follow on to that, circulating vehicles is always kind of a danger, especially if you've ever been in Target or Cubs parking lots. I know you have that green aisle that runs north-south there, kind of on your existing spaces. Is there any consideration for a pedestrian walkway so you don't lose spaces, but have a safe way to go from that far corner lot all the way into the building. That's a long way to go. You're crossing your main traffic. I know you have pedestrian ways closer to the building there, but there's really nothing to service this new space other than walking down the drive aisles.
That is true. We do not currently have any plans for that at this time. Right now, we do have one green path going back to that area, which could be a potential spot for us to add something like that in the future. But luckily, we have a lot of people who are, fairly mature coming into our facility, and our employees are, for the most part, parking out there. And so they're very respectful of the speed limits that are necessary to traverse an area like that, which is very nice because that's where I park.
Sure.
The furthest out I can.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we do have a public hearing on this matter, so at this time I will open a public hearing in planning case 19-10, request for dimensional flexibility for impervious coverage, parking stall length, and parking setback at Mercy Hospital, 3050 Coon Rapids Boulevard. Anyone present wish to speak at the public hearing, please come to the microphone. Give your name and address for the record, please, and limit your comments to 5 minutes.
Thank you for listening to my comments. I'm Bill Kinney. My address is 4060 115th Avenue, which is directly behind the Mercy parking lot, contiguous with the other side of 115th Avenue. And I really have no objection to the project that Mercy is doing. I've lived there for 50 years. I know all the past history of the flooding. My neighbor, Dave Heiligen, was the one, I think, who motivated the creation of the pond in the first place, because as he said, the water would run down his driveway and right into his basement. And I think since the creation of the pond, there has not been a problem. And I guess my only concern is if indeed the city storm system is not adequate to handle this runoff, are we as neighbors going to be assessed for it? It would seem to me that we have no problem now, and the request is made by the hospital for their benefit, that there isn't any reason that we should be assessed for additional storm sewer changes. I guess my only other concern is what might happen on 115th Avenue in terms of, I don't know whether the curbing refers to 115th or paving, or is that entirely on the parking surface?
It's entirely for the parking.
Okay,
No
so
improvements are being proposed.
Okay, all right, okay, so that wouldn't be a factor. Through no fault of my own, I live in an 80-year-old house that was originally built with the footprint on more than one lot, so I get taxed for 2 lots. And I worry about that if we're going to do any major changes on the road there. But I guess that's all I have to say, and appreciate your consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak at the public hearing?
Hello, my name is Jacqueline Walmo. I live on 4126 115th Avenue. On that photo that was up, it was just the lower left corner was my lot. I also have the perspective of working at Mercy Hospital for greater than the last 30 years. So I know about the parking situation as well. Excuse me. And I know the parking is tight, but it seems to be tight more in the visitor parking area over by the clinic and the hospital, by the mother-baby center is kind of really where the parking need is, not down in this other area. I have photos, if you'd like, of that whole back lot being empty on numerous occasions along the fence there. But my biggest concern is living in the neighborhood. That's really a nice buffer, that pond, to noise, and there's trees there. The introduction of adding more lights in that area is a concern of mine, that shine in my bedroom already in the wintertime. I can see the lights already. And then, you know, I guess the environmental impact, it was the other, you know, bringing everything to code sounds great. But just having that open space, you know, we're only 500 yards or so from the Mississippi River. So that, I guess, is a concern that was addressed already. But I'm kind of opposed to it because I really don't feel the need. I've never had trouble parking. So I guess you know, I disagree with the proposal. So I just feel like it's going to negatively affect the property along 115th, just with more noise, more traffic, and it's really not necessary. So that's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
My name is Cassandra Hamilton. I'm also a Coon Rapids resident. I don't live in that exact area, but I work at Mercy. And so when Jackie told me about this, I said, I definitely do not agree that we need more parking out there for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's very rare that you really do have a parking shortage. I've come in at 3 o'clock plenty of times, meetings during the day, whatever, and if you want to park far out, you can find a spot already. But I also don't understand why they would need to build parking out there, why they can't just build up. So I have a question, I guess. With the storm management drainage system, can you do that underground stuff and then still allow the frog pond to be there? Does it have to be parking above? I mean, I understand the point of the stormwater drainage system. Obviously, that's extremely important, especially with the Mississippi there. We want all that water, you know, and I know Align obviously built parking ramps and took all that grass area away. So that grass area is already gone. So I understand the need for the stormwater system, but does it have to be parking on top? Why can't it be a fresh space area with trees, with frog pond, with above ground drainage system still? So I don't know if I guess I can't get that answer, huh?
Well, I'll come
Oh, okay.
Get your address.
Yeah, 2748 111th Avenue Northwest.
Thank you.
Yep. So that's one question. And then the other thing is, I guess, like, and this is my issue with most corporations, is that they don't want to spend the money to build up. It's just easier just to take away more green space and let's make more tar. The reflective heating back into the environment from the asphalt, the tar, contributing to global warming as well. Again, if you build up, you're not increasing that surface area that's reflecting all the sun and everything up again. So there's several environmental aspects of that concerns me as a more science kind of person. I guess, yeah, so I'd rather, Alina has plenty of money. They could just build up. So.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak at the public hearing? Last call, anyone wish to speak? All right, prior to my closing the public hearing, I received an email that I'll read a portion of. Email was from Michael and Cheryl McGreevy at 11215 Dakota Street. They state, now to the topic at hand, my husband and I are vehemently opposed to any such approval being given to exceed maximum allowed impervious coverage. Surely, as chairman of the planning commission, you already have well in mind the excessive amount of impervious coverage the site already has, as well as the light pollution they cause. By a reminder, I have included, well, look at the amount of concrete. Do they really need to remove the small amount of wetlands that they have provided and are inhabited by ducks and frogs? In addition, does the city desire to put in danger the nearby homes, including ours, that then will be more prone to flooding from runoff? We pay nearly $8,000 a year in property taxes. To pay such high taxes and to not be represented in a fair way by our own city would be unacceptable in our eyes. If we suffer bad effects, floods, loss of property value, or otherwise, from an approval to extend the parking lot, I can assure you that the city will not have heard the last of this matter. Many neighbors in the area are just as vehemently opposed as we are. Thank you for consideration. Appreciate hearing our concerns. And that was from Michael and Cheryl McGreevy. And not seeing anyone else at the public hearing, we will close the public hearing. Petitioners, if you would care to answer the questions that had been raised.
Thank you, Chair, Commissioners. Thank you to the residents for your comments. Mr. Kinney, you made a comment about assessments, and I think you mentioned it, Scott, but it would be hospital-funded improvements, and they would all be on the hospital property with the exception of the connection out to the storm sewer in the street. So that would be all hospital-funded. The concerns about parking not seeming to be needed and generally being open, yes, there are times where there are parking spots open in the back there. And I know Alina, because I sit in the meetings, I'm not directly involved in the discussions, but I get to hear them often about trying to negotiate which different groups within the hospital system get to park where the doctors park, where all the different staff members can park. And there's often quite animated discussions about that, I know, with Mercy. And so, but the point being that there are open spots in the back on occasion is true. But there are also times where it is full and it is becoming a problem. And the goal of the project is not necessarily to fix a crisis, because it's not to that point, but it's to avoid the point where we have residents that are angry because employees are parking in the neighborhood. And yes, they could go up with the parking ramp, but it's an order of magnitude of cost difference to go up versus do a surface lot at this time. We have to do the underground system. We have to tear up some pavement. We have to tear up that whole area back there to do the system, even if the pond were to remain, it would get completely excavated and torn up to bring the storm system up to modern day standards. The volume of water that we're talking about treating with the new system relative to that pond, the pond would hold about 25,000 cubic feet of water. The proposed system will hold about 205,000 cubic feet of water. So not quite tenfold increase in the volume of water that we're needing to treat as a result of bringing it up to modern standards. So it's a significant undertaking, and the current pond just doesn't serve the need of modern stormwater management requirements. The question about flooding, again, talking to the stormwater management requirements of the day, we are not allowed to run stormwater off of the site at any greater rate than it does today. And that's part of the reason that the storm system is so big under the pavement, is that it allows for, in large storm systems, that stormwater to fill up and then drain down slowly. So it actually provides more opportunity for stormwater to be stored on site prior to running off. So it's not running off at any different rate than it is today, and that includes underground in the piping system. So when we say that we don't have problems today, that's true for the runoff into the piping, and it'll stay that way because of the rates that we are required to keep our runoff at. What we are providing is a significant more amount of infiltration. So right now that stormwater comes into the pond or comes into the piping and goes immediately off, yes, and right into the river, untreated, carrying the pollutants off the parking lot, carrying pollutants off the site, and goes into the river, carries lots of phosphorus. In the current system, much of that water will be infiltrated into the ground and won't run off into the river, which is the goals of modern-day stormwater management. It used to be get it away from the site as fast as you can, but that just sent it downriver. So now it's to get it back into the ground in about the same place as it falls. I think that's the extent of the comments that I have. Is there any questions?
Commissioner? Thank you.
Thank you.
Commission, thoughts? Comments? Commissioner Geisler?
Just a brief comment, keeping up to code with stormwater management is good. I mean, honestly, it needs to be done well. The watershed is the leader there as far as what has to happen. And really, yeah, that is the way to do it. As you mentioned, you're adding quite a bit of capacity to keep it in place and to allow natural seepage and infiltration into the area. We know this soil is pretty sandy too. It goes pretty quick. It makes its way into the water table. It may flow up and may flow down, but I do believe that what you're adding from a water management perspective is well and beyond what your parking lot would require, just the addition of the parking lot, and is truly a long-term mindful solution. So I do really appreciate of doing mindful environmental care and hearing feedback from the watershed and doing what's right with the stormwater runoff that goes right into the river there versus just saying you didn't have to. So I appreciate that.
Chair Schwartz.
Commissioner Knobloch?
I agree with Commissioner Geisler with everything he said. It is the stormwater and doing an impervious parking lot may not sound extremely sexy or desirable, but it is an investment, and Mercy Hospital is a very valuable resource in our community, and it is growing, and it's benefiting the whole community. And I think this is a very wise investment that will provide benefits to stormwater management and provide a little bit of growing or breathing space for the parking environment. So I will support it, as I think it's a good infrastructure investment. So.
Anyone else?
I'll make a motion.
Commissioner Schwanke?
We'll move to recommend approval in Plan Case 19-10, move to recommend approval for dimensional flexibility for impervious coverage, parking stall length, and parking setback from 115th Avenue based on the findings as described in the agenda.
Second.
Do we need to call out the condition of approval with the additional landscaping, or is that already included? It's included, thank you.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Motion by Schwanke, second by Knobloch. Any further discussion?
Does the motion need to carry the statement modification will result in better integration of the uses of public amenities?
I didn't catch that. The landscaping?
No, the statement for the dimensional flexibility, a finding, does that have to be part of the motion? The
I
modification
think
will
referencing them in the motion is sufficient.
Okay.
But if you'd like to have the landscaping reviewed and improved, you should include that as a condition of your recommendation.
So, if I heard that correctly, it's exactly what I said, but adding in the finding for the dimensional flexibility, the modification will result in better integration. Is that what you're referring to? Okay, so the modification will result in better integration of uses or additional public amenities that will further the intent of the section. And then also the condition of approval, which is the additional landscaping as described in the agenda as well.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Schmolke, second by Knobloch. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. This is a recommendation by the Planning Commission and decision by the City Council at their June 4th meeting. Thank you. And other business, Mr. Harlicker.
At this point, we really going to give you some updates on what's going on. I know the Honda dealership is hoping to get up and running the next couple of weeks. They're working diligently on working on their items that need to be addressed prior to opening. If you've noticed, as you drive down Highway 10, the old Chrysler dealership is now gone.
Yep.
And they'll be working on doing the parking lot installations up there and expanding the parking lot to where that building used to be. And that would bring that project to completion. The building permit was submitted for the self-storage facility over on Foley on 101st. So that's making its way through the system. I think that's it.
On Foley Avenue, I think it was about a year ago, we did the approval for the church there on, I can't remember what the.
The old Liberty Park grocery.
Thank you, yes.
Yep.
Yes, and I was just curious, has that project completed?
No, it's not.
Okay.
They still have to finish the improvements on site. It's not completed yet.
Okay.
And the church addition on the right behind Home Furniture, is that completed yet, or is that still work in progress?
I'm not sure if that's completed yet or not. I haven't been down there in a while. You're talking the one by the park there on Woodcrest?
Yes, beside the tobogganing hill or whatever.
Yep, the addition to the church,
Yeah, I believe they're still working there.
Okay.
And what do we have on the agenda for next month?
Next month, we've got an application for, I can't think of it right now.
Isn't the retail building?
Oh, yeah, there's proposing a retail building in front of Wells Fargo Bank on Main and Northdale, similar to what they was constructed in front of Home Depot. They have, excess parking there. So they're proposing about a 6,000 square foot multi-tenant building. One of the nice improvements that they're proposing is moving that drive aisle, or that access point from Northdale farther away from the intersection to improve circulation
Good.
along there.
And that's it for next month, as far
Yep.
as you know?
They'll be doing a preliminary plat along with that, just kind of like Home Depot.
Okay. All right, Commission, anybody have anything?
Mr. Chair?
Mr.
I
Michael?
would like to say that it's very interesting and very nice to go and drive by and see some of these projects that we have voted on and approved. The Honda dealership, I think, looks great. I was over at Panera the other day, the veterinary clinic, and some of these things that we have approved and whatever, it's really nice to see them actually happen, and you see the finished product. It's kind of satisfying.
I have a question for Scott, for
Uh-oh.
Mr. Harlicker. Rapids Honda the Honda dealership is progressing very well. What is the progression of, is it Walter Nissan?
Yeah,
Nissan or Nissan?
Yeah, at this point, they haven't submitted permits. Their site plan approval was extended last year to mid to the end of summer.
Okay.
So they have to start construction and pull permits
so
prior
long.
to that, otherwise the site plan approval expires. They're only allowed one year extension.
Okay, thank you.
And anyone ready to Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Geisler, second by Casey. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Meeting's adjourned.